For centuries, we've underestimated the brilliance of ancient civilizations, dismissing them as primitive societies with basic tools and simple understanding. But modern science is proving us wrong, one discovery at a time. Today, we'll explore some of the most remarkable inventions from the ancient world, technologies so advanced that we're only now beginning to understand their true genius. These aren't just archaeological curiosities, they're revolutionary innovations that modern engineers and scientists are studying, copying, and implementing in our contemporary world. From self-healing concrete that has lasted 2 millennia to precision surgical tools that rival modern instruments, our ancestors possessed knowledge that was lost to time, only to be rediscovered by accident or through painstaking research. It's the year 126 AD in Rome. Workers are completing the magnificent Pantheon, mixing a special concrete that their descendants will still be marveling at nearly 2,000 years later. While our modern concrete structures crumble after mere decades, Roman buildings stand strong, defying time, weather, and even earthquakes. For generations, engineers scratched their heads at this phenomenon. How could ancient Romans, without modern chemistry or precision instruments, create a building material superior to anything we produce today? The answer lay hidden in plain sight, embedded in the very structures that surrounded us. In 2023, researchers at MIT finally cracked the code. The discovery revealed that ancient Roman concrete incorporated self-healing manufacturing strategies, a breakthrough that could revolutionize modern construction and reduce its environmental impact. The secret ingredient wasn't magic. It was lime clasts, small chunks of quicklime that ancient Romans deliberately included in their concrete mixture. For centuries, archaeologists assumed these white specks were simply impurities, evidence of poor mixing techniques. They couldn't have been more wrong. Here's where the genius becomes apparent. When cracks develop in Roman concrete over time, water seeps in and reacts with these lime clasts. This triggers a chemical process that produces new calcium carbonate, literally healing the crack from within. It's like having microscopic repair crews embedded throughout the entire structure, ready to spring into action whenever damage occurs. But the Romans went even further. They discovered that volcanic ash from specific regions, particularly around the Bay of Naples, contained pozzolanic properties that made their concrete even stronger underwater. This is why Roman harbors and aqueducts have survived submersion and constant water exposure for 2 millennia. The environmental implications are staggering. Modern concrete production accounts for approximately 8% of global CO2 emissions. If we could replicate Roman techniques on a massive scale, we could dramatically reduce construction's carbon footprint while creating structures that last centuries instead of decades. Dr. Admir Masix from MIT explains that understanding these ancient techniques isn't just about appreciating the past. It's about reimagining our future. Construction companies worldwide are now investing millions in research to incorporate self-healing concrete into modern buildings, bridges, and infrastructure. Think about what this means for developing nations, where infrastructure investment must last generations. Imagine highways that repair their own potholes, or water treatment facilities that maintain themselves for centuries without costly renovations. The Romans weren't just building for their time, they were building for eternity. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect is how this discovery challenges our assumptions about technological progress. We assume that newer is always better, that each generation surpasses the last. But sometimes the greatest innovations come from looking backward, from recognizing that our ancestors possessed wisdom we've somehow forgotten. The Roman concrete revelation has sparked a renaissance in archaeological engineering, with researchers now examining other ancient building techniques with fresh eyes. What other secrets lie hidden in plain sight, embedded in structures we pass by every day? In 1901, Greek sponge divers working near the island of Antikythera made a discovery that would puzzle scientists for over a century. Among the artifacts recovered from an ancient Roman shipwreck was a corroded bronze device, no larger than a shoebox, containing an intricate system of gears and dials that seemed impossibly sophisticated for its time. Initially dismissed as some kind of navigational astrolabe, this mysterious mechanism would eventually be recognized as the world's first analog computer, a device so advanced that nothing comparable would appear in recorded history until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, more than 1,000 years later. The Antikythera mechanism, dating to approximately 87 BC, represents a pinnacle of ancient Greek engineering that completely rewrites our understanding of technological development in the classical world. This isn't just an impressive artifact. It's evidence of an entire scientific tradition that was lost and forgotten for centuries. Recent analysis using advanced CT scanning and 3D reconstruction has revealed the mechanism's true purpose. It was designed to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and known planets with extraordinary accuracy. But that's just the beginning. The device could calculate lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance, track the complex elliptical orbit of the moon, and even predict the dates of the ancient Olympic Games. The level of astronomical knowledge required to create such a device is breathtaking. The Greeks who built this machine understood that lunar months don't align perfectly with solar years, requiring complex calculations to maintain accuracy over long periods. They knew about the moon's varying speed as it orbits Earth, a concept that wouldn't be mathematically formalized until Kepler's laws of planetary motion in the 17th century. Professor Tony Freeth from University College London, who has spent decades studying the mechanism, describes it as more complex than many mechanical devices from the 18th century. The gear trains alone represent mathematical ratios that perfectly capture the relationships between celestial cycles, achieved through bronze gears cut with precision that wouldn't look out of place in a modern workshop. But here's what makes this discovery truly revolutionary. It suggests that ancient Greek civilization possessed a level of mechanical sophistication that we never imagined. If such complex devices existed in the 1st century BC, what other technologies did the ancients possess that simply haven't survived? The implications extend far beyond archaeology. Modern computer scientists are studying the mechanism's gear ratios and mechanical logic to better understand analog computing principles. Some researchers believe that certain aspects of the device's design could inspire new approaches to mechanical computing, particularly for applications where electronic systems might fail. The Antikythera mechanism also revolutionizes our understanding of ancient education and knowledge transmission. Creating such a device required collaboration between astronomers, mathematicians, and master craftsmen. This suggests sophisticated educational institutions and technical knowledge networks that were far more advanced than previously believed. Perhaps most intriguingly, the mechanism may not have been unique. Ancient texts reference similar devices, and Roman writers like Cicero mention mechanical models of the heavens. This implies that analog computers might have been more common in the ancient world than we ever suspected, with the Antikythera mechanism being the sole survivor of an entire technological tradition. The device challenges our linear view of technological progress. We assume that complex machinery is a modern invention, that our ancestors relied on simple tools and basic calculations. But the Antikythera mechanism proves that human ingenuity has always found ways to solve complex problems, regardless of the available materials or theoretical frameworks. As we develop increasingly sophisticated digital computers, there's something profoundly humbling about recognizing that the fundamental concept, using mechanical systems to perform complex calculations, was mastered over 2,000 years ago by craftsmen working with bronze and human insight. For over 1,000 years, Damascus steel was the stuff of legends. Warriors from medieval Europe to the Mongol Empire spoke in hushed tones about blades forged in the Middle East that could slice through European swords like butter, bend without breaking, and maintain their razor-sharp edge through countless battles. These weren't merely superior weapons. They were technological marvels that combined metallurgical knowledge, lost to history, with craftsmanship that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The secret of Damascus steel represented one of humanity's greatest technological mysteries, a riddle that stumped metallurgists for centuries. True Damascus steel, known historically as Wootz steel, originated in ancient India around 300 BC and was perfected in the Middle East. The steel was created from a specific type of Indian iron ore that contained trace amounts of vanadium, tungsten, and other elements that created its legendary properties. But the ore alone wasn't enough. The forging process itself was crucial to creating the steel's unique characteristics. What made Damascus steel truly extraordinary wasn't just its strength, but its distinctive watered silk pattern that rippled across the blade's surface. This wasn't mere decoration. It was visible evidence of the steel's internal structure, carbon nanotubes and carbide nanowires that wouldn't be understood by modern science until the development of electron microscopy in the 20th century. The forging process itself was remarkably sophisticated. Master smiths would heat the raw Wootz ingots to precise temperatures. Too hot, and the special properties would be destroyed. Too cool, and the steel wouldn't form properly. They would then fold and hammer the metal repeatedly, creating layers upon layers of varying carbon content that gave the finished blade its incredible strength and flexibility. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. The knowledge of creating Damascus steel was gradually lost over time. By the 18th century, no one knew how to make it anymore. The last true Damascus blades were forged in the early 1800s, and then the technology vanished completely. Modern attempts to recreate Damascus steel failed for over 2 centuries. Metallurgists could create steel that looked similar, but it lacked the legendary properties of the original. It wasn't until the 1980s that researchers began to understand why. They were missing crucial trace elements and didn't fully understand the nanoscale structures that gave Damascus steel its properties. Dr. Verhoeven at Iowa State University made the breakthrough in the 1990s when he discovered that authentic Damascus steel contained carbon nanotubes, cylindrical structures of carbon atoms arranged in a hexagonal pattern. These nanotubes, invisible to the naked eye, were distributed throughout the steel matrix, creating a composite material that was simultaneously hard and flexible. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond medieval weaponry. The techniques used to create Damascus steel represent early nanotechnology, achieved through empirical knowledge and skilled craftsmanship rather than scientific theory. Ancient smiths were creating carbon nanotube composites over 1,000 years before we even knew what carbon nanotubes were. Modern materials. Science is now studying these ancient techniques to develop new superalloys for aerospace applications, surgical instruments, and industrial tools. The principles behind Damascus steel are being adapted for creating modern composite materials that combine strength, flexibility, and durability in ways that purely synthetic approaches sometimes can't achieve. The story of Damascus steel also highlights how easily technological knowledge can be lost. These weren't primitive craftsmen working with basic tools. They were master technologists whose understanding of metallurgy was so sophisticated that it took modern science centuries to catch up. Their workshops were essentially advanced materials laboratories, producing results that we're still trying to fully replicate. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect is how this ancient technology was developed through generations of practical experimentation. Without periodic tables, electron microscopes, or theoretical frameworks, ancient smiths developed an intuitive understanding of nanoscale material science. They couldn't explain why their techniques worked, but they had perfected methods that created some of the most advanced materials in human history. Today, as we develop new supermaterials for everything from spacecraft to medical implants, we're essentially following in the footsteps of these ancient master smiths, using modern tools to achieve what they accomplished through skill, patience, and generations of accumulated knowledge. Imagine facing an enemy whose ships could launch liquid fire that burned on water, couldn't be extinguished by conventional means, and would continue burning until it consumed everything in its path. For over 800 years, the Byzantine Empire wielded such a weapon, a secret so closely guarded that its formula died with its creators, leaving one of history's greatest military mysteries. Greek fire, known in its time as liquid fire or sea fire, was the ultimate deterrent weapon of the medieval world. First deployed in 672 AD during the Arab siege of Constantinople, this incendiary weapon saved the Byzantine Empire from destruction and maintained its naval supremacy for centuries. But unlike other ancient weapons, Greek fire wasn't just tactically superior. It represented a level of chemical sophistication that wouldn't be matched until the development of modern incendiary weapons. The weapon's psychological impact was as devastating as its physical effects. Enemy sailors reported seeing Byzantine ships approach with bronze tubes mounted on their prows, followed by roaring sounds and streams of fire that seemed to come from hell itself. The fire would spread rapidly across water surfaces, turning entire harbors into infernos that could burn for hours. What made Greek fire truly terrifying was its unique properties. Unlike ordinary fire, it burned on water and could only be extinguished by very specific methods: sand, vinegar, or urine, according to historical accounts. Water not only failed to put it out, but seemed to make it burn more fiercely. This suggests a sophisticated understanding of chemical reactions that goes far beyond simple petroleum-based mixtures. The exact composition of Greek fire remains unknown, protected by what was arguably history's most successful state secret. The Byzantine emperors restricted knowledge of its manufacture to a handful of trusted craftsmen, and the formula was passed down through generations under strict security measures. When the Byzantine Empire fell, the secret died with it. Modern chemical analysis of historical accounts and archaeological evidence suggests that Greek fire was likely a complex mixture of petroleum distillates, quicklime, sulfur, and possibly phosphorus or calcium compounds. But recreating the exact formula has proven impossible, partly because the specific petroleum sources available to Byzantine chemists no longer exist or have changed composition over time. Recent research by military historians and chemists suggests that Greek fire might have been more sophisticated than previously thought. Rather than a single substance, it may have been a family of different incendiary mixtures, each optimized for specific tactical situations: naval combat, siege defense, or anti-personnel use. Dr. Kaldelis from Ohio State University argues that Greek fire represents one of the earliest examples of state-sponsored weapons research and development. The Byzantine government invested enormous resources in perfecting and protecting this technology, creating what was essentially a medieval military-industrial complex focused on maintaining their technological advantage. The manufacturing process itself required advanced chemical knowledge. Creating stable, transportable, incendiary mixtures that could be deployed effectively in combat situations demands understanding of chemistry, metallurgy, and engineering. The bronze siphons used to deploy Greek fire incorporated pressure systems and ignition mechanisms that were remarkably sophisticated for their time. But Greek fire's impact extended beyond military applications. The secrecy surrounding its manufacture led to significant advances in Byzantine chemistry and metallurgy. The workshops that produced Greek fire became centers of technological innovation, developing new alloys for the deployment systems and creating purification techniques for the chemical components. The weapon also influenced medieval military doctrine and naval architecture. Ships had to be redesigned to carry Greek fire safely. Harbor defenses were modified to incorporate incendiary weapons, and entire tactical systems evolved around this single technology. The mere threat of Greek fire forced enemy nations to completely rethink their naval strategies. Perhaps most remarkably, Greek fire demonstrates how a single technological advantage could determine the fate of empires. Without this weapon, Constantinople likely would have fallen to Arab forces in the 7th century, completely changing the course of European and Middle Eastern history. The Byzantine Empire's survival for nearly 800 additional years can be directly attributed to their monopoly on this incendiary technology. The story of Greek fire also illustrates the fragility of technological knowledge. Despite its military importance, the secret was eventually lost, not through enemy espionage or conquest, but through the gradual breakdown of institutional knowledge transfer systems. By the time the Byzantines realized their mistake, it was too late to recover the formula. Modern military researchers continue studying Greek fire, not to recreate medieval weapons, but to understand principles of incendiary warfare and chemical weapons development. The Byzantine achievement represents early chemical warfare capabilities that were centuries ahead of their time, achieved through empirical research and careful experimentation rather than theoretical chemistry. In 1887, archaeologists excavating the ancient Roman city of Pompeii made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of ancient medicine. Buried beneath volcanic ash for nearly 2,000 years, they found a complete surgical kit containing over 150 different instruments. Tools so sophisticated and precisely crafted that many would not look out of place in a modern operating room. This wasn't the first evidence of Roman surgical capabilities, but it was the most comprehensive, revealing a level of medical sophistication that challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient healthcare. These instruments represent not just individual tools, but evidence of an entire medical system that was performing complex surgeries with success rates that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era. The Pompeii Surgical Collection includes instruments for virtually every type of operation: delicate eye surgery, brain surgery, gynecological procedures, and orthopedic operations. But what makes these tools truly remarkable isn't just their variety. It's their precision engineering and specialized design that demonstrates deep understanding of human anatomy and surgical principles. Consider the Roman speculum, used for gynecological examinations and procedures. The device features a sophisticated screw mechanism that allows for gradual, controlled dilation, exactly the same principle used in modern medical instruments. The bronze construction includes precise tolerances and smooth surfaces that minimize trauma during insertion, suggesting understanding of both metallurgy and patient comfort. Even more impressive are the Roman trepanation instruments, used for drilling holes in skulls to relieve pressure or remove damaged bone tissue. These tools feature adjustable depth guards to prevent penetrating too deeply into brain tissue, and specialized bits designed to create clean, circular openings. Archaeological evidence shows that many patients survived these procedures, with bone healing patterns indicating successful recovery. Roman cataract surgery instruments represent perhaps the pinnacle of ancient surgical precision. The needles used for couching, a procedure to displace cataracts, are incredibly fine, with points measuring less than a millimeter in diameter. The handles are weighted to provide precise control during the delicate procedure of manipulating the lens within the eye. But individual instruments only tell part of the story. Roman surgical sets were organized systems, with each tool designed to work in conjunction with others during complex procedures. Forceps with different jaw configurations, probes with various tip shapes, and cutting instruments with specialized blades suggest standardized surgical techniques that were taught and practiced throughout the Roman medical system. Dr. Lawrence Bleekes, who has spent decades studying Roman surgical instruments, argues that the sophistication of these tools reflects a medical education system that was far more advanced than previously believed. Roman physicians weren't just treating wounds and setting bones. They were performing elective surgeries, cosmetic procedures, and complex internal operations with success rates that suggest considerable experience and skill. The metallurgy alone represents significant technological achievement. Roman surgical instruments were made from bronze alloys specifically formulated for medical use, with compositions that provided the right balance of hardness, corrosion resistance, and workability. Many instruments show evidence of repeated sharpening and maintenance, suggesting long careers in active medical practice. Archaeological evidence from Roman hospitals and medical schools reveals training programs that included anatomical study using cadavers, surgical practice on animals, and apprenticeship systems that produced highly skilled practitioners. This wasn't folk medicine or primitive healing. It was systematic medical science with educational institutions and professional standards. Perhaps most remarkably, Roman surgical techniques included anesthesia and infection control measures. Historical texts describe the use of opium-based painkillers, mandrake extracts, and even early forms of surgical antisepsis using wine and vinegar solutions. These practices suggest understanding of principles that wouldn't be scientifically validated until the 19th century. Modern surgeons studying Roman instruments often express amazement at their sophistication. Dr. Maria Gonzalez, a neurosurgeon who has examined Roman trepanation tools, notes that the basic principles haven't changed. Modern instruments are made from better materials and incorporate electronic components, but the fundamental designs remain remarkably similar. The Roman medical system also included specialized surgical training and certification processes. Physicians had to demonstrate competency with specific instruments before being allowed to practice certain procedures, and medical licensing appears to have been regulated by professional guilds that maintained quality standards. But perhaps the most impressive aspect is how this surgical knowledge was preserved and transmitted. Roman medical texts include detailed illustrations of instruments and step-by-step surgical procedures, creating an educational system that could train physicians throughout the empire. This standardization meant that a patient in Roman Britain could receive the same quality surgical care as someone in Rome itself. The loss of these medical capabilities during the fall of the Roman Empire represents one of history's greatest technological reversals. For over 1,000 years after Rome's collapse, European surgery regressed to crude techniques that would have been considered primitive by Roman standards. It wasn't until the Renaissance that surgical practice began to approach Roman levels of sophistication. In the year 132 AD, in the court of the Chinese Han Dynasty, an extraordinary device stood ready to detect earthquakes from hundreds of miles away. This wasn't just any ordinary instrument. It was the world's first seismoscope, invented by the polymath Zhang Heng, a device so advanced that its basic principles wouldn't be understood by Western science for another 1,500 years. The invention emerged from necessity. China's location along major tectonic boundaries made it particularly vulnerable to earthquakes, and the Han Dynasty needed a way to respond quickly to distant disasters. Without modern communication systems, earthquakes in remote provinces could cause massive suffering before the central government even learned of their occurrence. Zhang Heng's solution was a bronze vessel, approximately 6 feet in diameter, decorated with mountains, clouds, and mythical creatures. But this wasn't merely artistic ornamentation. It was a sophisticated scientific instrument disguised as a beautiful artifact. 8 dragon heads protruded from the vessel, each holding a bronze ball in its mouth, with 8 bronze toads positioned below, mouths open to catch falling balls. The genius lay in the internal mechanism. When seismic waves from a distant earthquake reached the device, a pendulum inside would swing in the direction of the earthquake's source. This motion would trigger a mechanism that caused the appropriate dragon to release its ball, which would fall into the corresponding toad's mouth with a loud sound, alerting palace officials to both the occurrence of an earthquake and its general direction. The first recorded activation of the seismoscope created a scandal. The device indicated an earthquake to the west, but no tremors were felt in the capital. Court officials accused Zhang Heng of fraud, questioning how his machine could detect earthquakes that didn't exist. Days later, messengers arrived reporting a devastating earthquake in Longxi, over 400 miles to the west, precisely in the direction the seismoscope had indicated. This wasn't just lucky guessing. It was scientific understanding of seismic wave propagation that wouldn't be formally understood in the West until the 19th century. Zhang Heng had somehow realized that earthquakes generate waves that travel through the Earth, and that these waves could be detected at great distances using sensitive mechanical systems. Recent attempts to reconstruct Zhang Heng's seismoscope have revealed the sophistication of his design. Modern seismologists working with engineers and historians have created working replicas that can indeed detect simulated earthquake signals, though the exact mechanism remains partially mysterious due to incomplete historical descriptions. The device represents several technological breakthroughs simultaneously. First, it demonstrates understanding of pendulum physics and mechanical amplification systems. The internal mechanism had to be sensitive enough to respond to tiny ground movements while being stable enough to ignore local vibrations from human activity or wind. Second, the seismoscope shows remarkable insight into seismic wave behavior. Zhang Heng somehow understood that earthquake energy travels through solid earth as waves, and that these waves retain directional information even at great distances. This knowledge allowed him to design a system that could not only detect earthquakes but determine their approximate location. The metallurgy and precision manufacturing required for the device were also extraordinary. The pendulum system needed exact balance and calibration to function properly, requiring bronze casting techniques and mechanical engineering that approached modern precision standards. Each component had to be manufactured to precise specifications for the system to work reliably. But Zhang Heng's seismoscope wasn't an isolated achievement. It was part of a broader Chinese tradition of systematic natural observation and mechanical innovation. Chinese scientists of the Han Dynasty were creating armillary spheres for astronomical observations, water clocks with complex gear systems, and even early forms of paper-making technology. The seismoscope also demonstrates sophisticated understanding of government administration and disaster response. Zhang Heng realized that early warning systems could save lives and resources by enabling rapid response to natural disasters. This systems thinking approach, considering not just the technical problem but its broader social implications, shows remarkable foresight. Modern seismologists studying Zhang Heng's work are impressed by his intuitive understanding of seismic principles. Dr. Wang of the Chinese Seismological Bureau notes that the basic concept, using pendulum motion to detect ground movement, remains fundamental to modern seismic monitoring, though contemporary instruments use electronic sensors instead of bronze dragons. The loss and rediscovery of this technology illustrates how scientific knowledge can disappear and be reinvented centuries later. After the fall of the Han Dynasty, knowledge of seismoscope construction was gradually lost. It wasn't until the 1870s that Western scientists developed comparable earthquake detection systems, and even then, they were unaware of Zhang Heng's pioneering work. The Chinese seismoscope also highlights the importance of interdisciplinary thinking in technological innovation. Zhang Heng wasn't just an engineer or scientist, he was also a poet, mathematician, astronomer, and government official. This broad perspective allowed him to approach the earthquake detection problem from multiple angles, creating a solution that was simultaneously technically sophisticated and practically useful. Perhaps most remarkably, the seismoscope worked reliably for decades, continuing to detect earthquakes throughout the later Han Dynasty. Historical records show consistent performance over multiple decades, suggesting that Zhang Heng had created not just a prototype, but a mature technology suitable for practical application. Deep in the jungles of Central America, the ancient Maya created something that defied every assumption about pre-Columbian civilization: astronomical calendars so precise that they surpass the accuracy of our modern Gregorian calendar. These weren't simple day-counting systems, but sophisticated mathematical models of celestial mechanics that tracked planetary cycles, predicted eclipses, and calculated astronomical events with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched by Western astronomy until the space age. The Maya developed not one but multiple interlocking calendars, each serving different purposes and demonstrating various aspects of their astronomical knowledge. The most famous, the Long Count calendar, tracks days from a mythical creation date equivalent to August 11th, 3114 BC in our calendar. But this was just one component of a system so complex and accurate that modern astronomers are still discovering new levels of sophistication. Consider the Mayan calculation of the solar year: 365.2420 days. Our modern measurement, based on atomic clocks and satellite observations, calculates the solar year as 365.2422 days. The Maya were off by only 0.0002 days, an error of less than 20 seconds per year. Without telescopes, satellites, or atomic clocks, they achieved accuracy that surpasses the Gregorian calendar still used today. But solar year calculation was just the beginning. Mayan astronomers tracked Venus cycles with extraordinary precision, calculating the planet's synodic period as 584 days, exactly matching modern measurements. They understood that Venus appears as both morning and evening star, and their calendars incorporated these complex cycles into agricultural and ceremonial planning systems. Even more impressive was their eclipse prediction capability. Mayan astronomers could predict both solar and lunar eclipses years in advance, despite the complex gravitational interactions that make eclipse prediction mathematically challenging. The Dresden Codex, a surviving Mayan astronomical text, contains eclipse tables that remained accurate for centuries. The mathematical sophistication required for these calculations is breathtaking. Mayan astronomers worked with enormous numbers using a vigesimal, base 20, number system that included the concept of zero, a mathematical innovation that wouldn't reach Europe until the Middle Ages. Their astronomical calculations involved numbers in the millions, requiring mathematical techniques that were centuries ahead of contemporary civilizations. Dr. Anthony Aveni, from Colgate University, who has spent decades studying Mayan astronomy, argues that their achievements represent one of humanity's great intellectual accomplishments. The Maya weren't just observing the sky, they were creating mathematical models that could predict celestial events with scientific accuracy. The physical infrastructure supporting these calculations was equally impressive. Mayan cities incorporated astronomical observatories with precise alignments to track celestial events. The Caracol at Chichen Itza, for example, has windows positioned to observe Venus at its maximum elongation, while buildings throughout the Mayan world are aligned to track solstices, equinoxes, and other astronomical events. But perhaps most remarkably, Mayan calendars demonstrate understanding of astronomical cycles that require centuries of observation to detect. The precession of the equinoxes, the gradual shift in Earth's axis that creates a 26,000-year cycle, appears to be incorporated into long-count calculations. This suggests either incredibly long-term observation programs or mathematical insights that allowed them to detect patterns invisible to casual observation. The Venus calendar exemplifies Mayan sophistication. Not only did they track Venus's 584-day synodic period, but they also understood the relationship between Venus years and solar years, creating correction mechanisms to keep their Venus calendar aligned with solar observations over centuries. This required understanding multiple interlocking cycles and developing mathematical techniques to handle accumulated errors. Mayan lunar calculations were equally precise. They calculated the lunar month as 29.53020 days. Modern measurements give 29.53059 days, making their error less than 4 seconds per month. Over the course of a year, their lunar calendar would be off by less than a minute compared to actual lunar cycles. The integration of multiple calendars created a system of extraordinary complexity. The 260-day sacred calendar, Tzolk'in, interlocked with the 365-day solar calendar, Hab, to create 52-year cycles. These, in turn, were embedded within the long count's vast temporal framework, creating a system that could track both daily affairs and cosmic epochs spanning millennia. Recent discoveries have revealed even greater sophistication. Archaeoastronomer William Saturno's work at Zoltan has uncovered Mayan astronomical calculations that extend thousands of years into the future, suggesting that Mayan astronomers were creating predictive models for astronomical events that wouldn't occur for centuries after their own lifetimes. The accuracy of Mayan calendars also required sophisticated observational techniques. Without optical instruments, Mayan astronomers developed methods for making precise positional measurements of celestial objects. They used architectural alignments, water surfaces for reflection observations, and carefully positioned viewing apertures to achieve measurement accuracy comparable to telescopic observations. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of Mayan astronomy was its integration with practical applications. These weren't abstract mathematical exercises. The calendars governed agricultural cycles, ceremonial schedules, and political events. Mayan rulers planned military campaigns, scheduled important ceremonies, and organized agricultural activities based on astronomical calculations that required years of advanced planning. The intellectual achievement represented by Mayan calendars challenges fundamental assumptions about technological development and cultural sophistication. Without writing systems like our alphabet, without metal tools or wheels, The Maya created astronomical science that rivaled anything produced by classical civilizations with far greater material resources. Modern space agencies studying orbital mechanics and long-term mission planning often reference Mayan astronomical achievements. NASA scientists working on missions to Venus have noted that Mayan Venus calculations are so accurate that they could still be used for preliminary mission planning today, over 1,000 years after they were created. Each discovery we've explored tells the same story. Our ancestors were far more capable than we imagined. They possessed scientific insights we're only now rediscovering, engineering capabilities that surpass our current standards, and mathematical understanding that required centuries for us to match. This isn't just ancient history. It's a lesson about the nature of human intelligence and innovation. The Romans developed self-healing concrete that outlasts modern materials. Greeks created analog computers that wouldn't be matched for over a millennium. Chinese inventors built earthquake detection systems 1,500 years before Western science understood seismic waves. Indian metallurgists produced steel incorporating nanotechnology long before we knew what carbon nanotubes were. These achievements force us to confront uncomfortable questions about progress itself. We've assumed that technological development moves in straight lines, that each generation inevitably surpasses the last. But history tells a different story, one of knowledge gained and lost, of brilliant insights forgotten and laboriously rediscovered, of civilizations that achieved remarkable things only to have their knowledge disappear into the mists of time.